Hey guys, there's a new Team House merch store. You can come and check it out. The link is in the description. You can get Team House stickers, Team House patches, which are really cool and really well done, American made. Team House t-shirts, hoodies, mugs. Shout out to that one person that bought the Eyes On mug. Love you. Mouse pads, camelback, tote bag. I don't know why we have the tote bag. I'm not a big tote bag guy. If you are, all the more power to you. But yeah, we got a ton of cool stuff. Stickers, American made. Patches, American made. T-shirts are also American made, but I don't fulfill them. I'm actually going to be the one shipping you the patches and the stickers. They're very cool. Check it out. The teamhouse-shop.fourthwall.com. That's a crazy URL. We'll change that, but don't worry. The link is in the description. Take a look. And in the show notes if you're listening to us on audio. We really appreciate it. And thanks for the continued support. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Eyes On. We got a very special guest today, Jack Murphy. Jack, how's it going, bud?
Going good, man. Long time no see. It feels like it was only yesterday that we
Yeah.
were doing a Team House interview.
Yep, literally was probably 12 hours ago. Yeah. And I forced you to come on and do an Eyes On with us. So what's happening today? Big news. I mean, relatively big news. Trump spoke with Putin for an hour and then spoke with Zelensky after that, talking about they both signal that they're interested in a peace deal. People are freaking out because it seems as though Trump is kind of the big thing I'm seeing from like the West and NATO people and like different media outlets is that it's Trump and Putin that are going to carve up Europe and stuff like that, really doing a lot of like analogous to the 1930s and stuff like that. So that's kind of where we're at. What do you
I mean, it's
thought?
the same negotiated exit out of Afghanistan where we just negotiated with the Taliban and the Afghan government wasn't even a part of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. What you would think, you know, they should be a kind of at least a part in it. I mean, Zelensky's saying all the right things. It seems like, he's saying that he's interested in a peace deal. I mean, he can't really pop off about how he really feels, right? Like, everyone knows he hates Putin. You can't really blame him. But because he can't really piss off Trump.
Yeah, I mean, you heard I mean, he also said today that like he wants to have a call with Xi and Putin and propose that like we all cut our defense budgets in half. I mean, it's a lot of like pie in the sky kind of thinking, and I know
Right.
we'll get into like Pete Hegseth, but I mean, whatever you feel or however you feel about Donald Trump, I mean, his style is, chaos as a leadership style. He treats this stuff like it's a game show, It's like, oh, maybe it's gonna be this, but maybe it's gonna be that. Like,
Yeah.
tune in next time, guys, and find out how it all ends. So he has this propensity to throw out, and maybe he knows that some of them are pie in the sky, just ludicrous suggestions. And I think we saw a little bit of that over just the last 24 hours, even with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth going to Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. He was just speaking now too in Brussels, I guess, at NATO, uh, talking about how the U.S. Navy's not fitted to going up against Russia somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's really clownish. You reach a point where like, everyone's gonna say, "Oh, you have Trump derangement syndrome or something." It's like, no, when someone says something that's totally ridiculous,
Right.
and dumb, I'm just gonna say that. And I think Pete put his foot in his mouth here, and he said the other day, it was just what was it, just yesterday? He said that um, he sees no plausible scenario where Ukraine's territory, or at least all of it, will be returned to them, and doesn't see any possibility that Ukraine would ever join NATO. And so he
Yeah.
put those two things, they weren't even preconditions, they were just handouts to
Yeah.
Putin. before negotiations even began. And then today he started walking it back. He's like, oh, well, the only person who can negotiate is President Trump, the leader of the free world. I'm not going to stand up on this podium and say anything, one way or the other. So he was trying to like walk back his previous statement that had been pretty definitive just like 24 hours prior. And, that just speaks to, I think, him being out of his depth. You could try to attribute it to malice or something like that, and maybe that's the case. I don't know, but I think it's inexperience. I don't think he really
Yeah.
knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I feel listen, if I'm a European country, like a leader in a European country, Poland, Germany, take your pick, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm definitely coming out. Like the German chancellor came out and like said, yeah, there's not this, Europe's got to be involved in terms of what a peace will look like, And I think like the big question about like the peace deal or the ceasefire deal would be about like who would be managing the demilitarization area or like the lines, like are they going to be international troops? If so, who's going to like provide them? Also, at that point, like if somebody pops off, drinks a little bit too much vodka or something, and starts shooting at
There,
troops.
there is a United Nations organization, and forgive me if I can't remember the acronym. I think it's like UNED or UNCD. And after 2014, they came in and kind of managed to make sure both sides were following whatever agreement had been hashed out after the initial incursion into Ukraine. Um, so I mean that body could be brought back to do that ostensibly. But yeah, I mean these things are going to come up. Do you end up creating like a demilitarized zone like at the Golan Heights and
Right.
it's occupied by like Fijian and Pakistani and Indian peacekeepers? I mean, how's that going to work out? Those are all questions that will come up in the negotiations.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was just recently, I think, probably 30 or so minutes ago. President Trump was asked if he trusts Putin, and President Trump said, "Yeah, I believe he would like to see something in terms of with pieces, with trying to get peace done. I trust him on this subject." He also says he wants to see Russia back in the G7, which was kicked out of after Crimea, annexing Crimea. I think Putin would love to be back. I mean, I get like Trump. This is how Trump speaks. He speaks really nonchalantly and kind of like everyone's pal kind of thing. I think that's why a lot of Europe and NATO countries are taking it this way, understandably so, because they're in the actual sphere of Russian influence,
Sure.
right? Like they have to worry about if you're Poland, like you're fucking
Yeah,
freaking out.
there's a lot at stake here, and treating it like a game show, putting inexperienced people in these very senior positions, of course that makes them nuts. It's We must appear very schizophrenic to them, that they never
Yeah,
really know where they stand. And again, I mean, I think President Trump has this very odd propensity to attack our allies and cozy up to our adversaries. That I don't is some people say, Jack, well, he's playing four-dimensional chess. You don't understand, how it's like, okay, I kind of get it. You want to try something different to get a different result. I can understand it to a
sure.
point. But I mean, running around starting fights with like Denmark and Canada,
Right, yeah,
I,
sure.
what are you doing here? Like, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly no point in all that, like all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, listen, listen, I get it. I get why people are upset. Like he's playing nice with Putin, and like I don't know how anybody can trust a guy like
And the
Putin.
thing you have to understand, and I mean the publicly stated, not policy, but the outward facing public statements that a government makes don't always reflect what's happening behind closed doors for
Sure.
sure. But I mean, Putin is a dictator. And
Right.
I mean, this guy is not your friend. This guy does not want what's best for America. He doesn't give a shit about anyone here. He doesn't give a shit about Americans. He doesn't give a shit about Europeans. Does not care about that at all. His main concern is regime preservation, which is self preservation for him. And he will do anything it takes to maintain that. So seeing these people as like friends or like people we can cut a deal. It's like, no, these countries have interests and maybe we can appeal to their interests and we can reach some sort of a settlement on some issues. Some we're not, just to be honest. We're not going to reach negotiated settlements on all issues
Right.
with China and Russia. That's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and engage in diplomacy. But yeah, I find this strategy like very curious, and I think the Russians are probably celebrating it.
Yeah. I mean, the Russians came out and were like, yeah, we're willing, taking it as a very positive thing, obviously, that they're willing to talk. And I think they mentioned that, like, Trump has the will to get this done. Um, the other problem too, including Hegseth saying, like, they'll never be in NATO, um, was Trump talking about like the lines, the pre-2014 lines or 22 lines, or where the lines would end up. And he said, Russia really, I'm paraphrasing, Russia has really fought hard and lost a lot of guys for that land. It's like, guy, it's not Russia's land. This isn't, 1984. Like, this isn't like the Soviet Union. Russia has no claim to it anymore. Like, and guess what? They invaded, and Ukrainians have lost a ton of people as well. It's just
Yeah, I mean,
the
I just,
language is tough for people. Also, if you're a good negotiator, it's like you're just giving them
yeah, well, I
concessions
was
out
gonna
of the
say that.
gate. Like, what are we talking about? Like, you could be jovial and gregarious and stuff before you go into a negotiation, then be a cocksucker. That I get that. That's part of it. But just throwing out main points that people are all like interested
Yeah,
in is
yeah.
doesn't really make sense to me.
I mean, he was talking about how like Ukraine never should have gotten into that war. It's like, wait, they
Right.
didn't get into it. They got invaded. What are you talking about? And I mean, when I listen to his statements, particularly now we're looking at second term President Trump. I mean, when he talks, it just sounds like old man babble to me. I mean, it's incoherent. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Somebody's handing him an index card maybe with some talking points on it before he goes on camera. But I mean, it's just like perfectly clear this guy is not sound.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's questionable if he has both hands on the wheel. Like who's really driving this train?
Yeah. Um, I mean, the obvious answer is Elon Musk, but
Did you see the things that supposedly Elon's son was
yeah.
saying during
Yeah.
the press
Yeah.
conference?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just looking at that today and I listened to it myself and it sounds like that.
Yeah, it does. It's pretty wild. And you kind of can see, I don't know if Trump's seething or like he just doesn't know what's going, he's just not listening. You know what I mean? Like,
Or
uh,
maybe he's happy to go and do the press conferences and stuff like that and let, Elon just run amok behind the scenes. I don't know.
Elon destroy the Constitution. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Committee to
Yeah.
end the Constitution.
No biggie.
Go for it, Elon.
Yeah, the Elon kid stuff is wild. I mean, it's clearly a move in my opinion. Because he's had that whole aura and like that whole like narrative of him being a deadbeat father because he's got like 12 kids. Um, and I've seen it like recently. He has a kid on his shoulders. It was the kid was at inauguration parties, different things like that. Now he brings him into the Oval Office. I feel like it's definitely kind of stage managed.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I think Elon can afford to hire a babysitter if he needs it.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Like your kids with you in the Doge offices, like just chilling. You know what I
that's like
mean?
something I do where I drag my daughter around to work.
Right. You're
You
not
know,
worth 400 billion.
yeah, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Um, and even like the press conference yesterday with Musk and Trump in the Oval Office with the kid picking his nose, telling Trump to shut it. Uh, they asked Elon questions, and I guess he's learning from the school of like Trump, like where you just deny everything.
Yeah, just speak out of both sides of your mouth. Yeah.
It was like there's nothing coherent coming out of you. They asked him about conflict of interest, right, with his DoD contracts for SpaceX or whatever. And he's like, "Oh no, I have nothing to do with that. The employees of SpaceX deal with that." It's like, dude, you're still the CEO of the company. Are we like just gonna go over that fact and like not talk about that? It's kind of surreal what's going on.
Oh, it's very surreal.
Yeah, it's like it's not normal whatsoever. And I get it, Biden had mashed potato brains, but
Yeah, he
and
was. Yeah,
yeah, he was not fit to be president at all whatsoever. And what's interesting is we've talked about this before, like out of the Democrat side, like you see like really no kind of resistance at all.
nothing substantial.
Because you would know, like, the Republicans, even if it was like a normal moderate president, like a Biden 2.0, right? They would be screaming from the rooftops about everything and anything, right? Like trying to grasp at straws, whatever they can do to make the news, erode some of that support. And like it is the Dems can't get their shit together. It's pretty amazing. Like Hakeem Jeffries to me is I can't even believe he's the leader, the
Yeah,
minority
they
leader.
just seem neutered. They seem
Yeah,
professionally lost, maybe traumatized even. Yeah, they absolutely cannot get their act together, and I don't know if they'll be able to.
sure. Yeah, no, me neither.
I mean, no matter what your political views are, well, I shouldn't say that. That's a big assumption. But my opinion is that it's good to have an opposition party in the United States.
Right.
You know, a party that is in opposition to the one that's in power, be it Democrat or Republican. You know, you want these checks and balances of someone out there, you know, challenging these decisions. Like, is this really the right thing to do? Is it the legal thing to do, etc. Um, right now, I feel like we don't have an opposition party.
No, no, they're totally like toothless. It's pretty wild to see. I think they just didn't expect to lose. That's what I think. I, I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
believe that.
but then when they did, why didn't they have a plan? Like some sort of a plan.
Yeah, they have no plan whatsoever.
No, no, they don't.
Um,
No one is
s-
coming to save you.
no, right, exactly. Yeah, it's just you. So do something for the love of God. Um, I mean, I guess some other news like Tulsi Gabbard got confirmed. So
Yep.
that's good, I guess, for Russia. Uh, Sorry, guys. I know you guys are gonna get worked up about this, but like, let's call a spade a spade. Gabbard's an absolute liability.
Yeah.
I think Mitch McConnell was the only. No, Mitch McConnell either. I think he might have not voted for her. I'm almost certain
Yes.
he was the
Yeah.
only
He didn't vote.
Republican.
He didn't vote for her, and he voted against RFK Jr.
RFK
also.
Jr. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So just back quickly to. I saw another quote from Trump about talking about denuclearizing, like denuclearization. It's like come on, man. Come on. I mean, everybody would want that in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world. And as much as I have liberal ideals, I'll admit it right now. It's like, dude, you live in a real world. Like there's pragmatic ways of going about it. You can't just denuclearize. How are you going to trust another country to do the same thing? Right? Like it's just like we're wasting a lot of bandwidth on bullshit, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, correct. And you know, the disappointing thing is that the Republicans came into power saying, "Hey, the left has, you know, focused on the wrong things. They've been focused on DEI, they've been
Yeah.
focused on transgenders, all this other kind of stuff." And like to a certain point, I agree that the left focused way too much on
Me
that
too.
stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But to see them come in, you know, and they too are like USAID is the big
Right.
enemy that needs to be taken down. I mean, if you want to go through and audit them and make sure that all
Right.
their line items are in order, I have no problem with that at all. But
Or fire their director and get somebody in there who's gonna, do something that like
to to to
don't
attack it,
circumvent the Constitution. Go ahead, sorry.
attack this organization like it's the deep state, it's the embodiment of the deep state. You know, that because they hand out bags of rice to people overseas or engage like give polio vaccines or whatever.
Right. Or
um
AIDS medicine or, whatever.
Yeah, like this. So this is what you're focused on. This is it, not DEI. You're focused on USAID.
Yeah, I don't understand why the USAID was the one that got picked out of the bunch, right? Because there's a ton of departments that I'm sure have a lot of waste and fraud and stuff.
I could speculate on where some of that may have come from, but I won't. They probably just saw it as low hanging fruit. Like
Yeah,
it's
because
easy for them to go in, and I mean that's what it is at the end of the day. They're building up these little straw men to knock over, and then they can claim it as a victory. Like, oh, look what we did. You know, we tore down USAID. Like,
yeah.
okay, cool. I mean, now what?
What was
And that's
interesting
that's
that
the problem when you get into a sort of personalized presidential. I guess they're all personalized to an extent, but with President Trump, it's very much a personalized regime, if you will. And the question always becomes, with a populist too, what do you do for an encore?
right.
Like what? Okay,
What's
what's
next?
yeah, what's next?
Yeah, I mean that's could be the scary part of it. Yeah, I don't know what's next because like you can't really see them going into the DoD and chopping shit out. I mean, I would be surprised.
They are allegedly already at Veterans Affairs. Um, they're at IRS allegedly as of today. Um, I mean, they might send people and they might send these little teenagers into DoD at some point to muck around with the code. And I
Y-
mean, who's going to tell them no? It's not going to be Pete.
Right.
I mean, he was put in there as Secretary of Defense because he doesn't have the wherewithal to stand up to the president. They don't want another Mattis or Esper. They don't want somebody that might have a shred of independent thought at some point. So
Yeah.
they found this, overgrown frat boy and stuck him in there because he'll do what he's told.
hmm you think ceasefire gets done in Ukraine
A ceasefire is a possibility, yeah.
or a peace deal, whatever, you know what I mean? Like a freezing of the lines.
Possibly, yeah. Not so I'm talking about during the breadth of the Trump administration. So they have, basically almost 4 years
Yeah.
to do that. I think it's possible. I think Ukraine and Russia have both fought themselves nearly to exhaustion, close to exhaustion, because the battle lines move a little bit here and there, but they are more or less solidified at this point,
Yeah.
right? Um, so if neither side can make further progress, then that I think opens up the door for negotiations. Um, and I think, those looking for some sort of ceasefire or overall peace negotiations. I mean, it's always worthwhile to try. The terms offered, and I think that's why they haven't happened yet, is that neither side was really quite ready to begin negotiating. Neither
Yeah.
side wanted to offer any compromise. I think we're far enough along in the war at this point that during the Trump administration we could, yeah, see some sort of agreement.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. And I hope it's not just like Russia winning completely. Like every concession possible they get.
Yeah, I mean that's the concern because again, the administration, the Trump administration wants a win in the box. And a win for them is, hey, I negotiated this ceasefire.
Yeah, it
And the way
doesn't
to get
matter. The particulars don't
right,
really
right.
matter.
Like where that borderline is,
Yeah.
does Russia get Kiev? I mean, that's not going to happen. But just
Right.
for instance, we just give them half of the country but that's fine for us because we got our settlement, we got our negotiation.
Yeah.
And so, that's a State of the Union address talking point there and a press conference. Like, we did this historic thing, even though you completely fucked our ally, Ukraine, and, put Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia all in a tight spot.
Yeah.
And they're the next on the chopping block and they all know it.
For sure. Yeah. Um, I try to think about like alternate history. Like imagine Kyiv did fall in a week or 5 days or whatever they said, where they'd be at now. Like they would have to be at least creeping towards I mean, NATO states, but maybe not. I don't know, but it's wild how the last 3 years, almost 3 years since the invasion, how it's played out and like the paper tiger that is Russia's military.
Yeah. Yeah. And their economy is just destroyed basically. And some economists think it'll never recover. Um, and the Russian system is kind of unsustainable anyway. I mean, Putin is going to go eventually, right? One way or the other. Um, and like I was, so this is interesting. I went to it was a recital actually, in Manhattan, and it was one of the Russian prisoners. He was a political dissident in Russia, and we got him loose as a part of the not the most recent prisoner exchange, the one before that, we got this guy out, and he gave a speech and like talked and like had a conversation about his imprisonment and about Russia. And then this famous Russian piano player, classical piano player, he's almost 90 years old, came out and played. And he became a political dissident at like age 87
Oh wow.
when the war in Ukraine popped off. He was like, I don't support this, and he left behind a very prestigious career in Russia over this war in Ukraine and his opposition to it. Um, but the guy who was a political prisoner in Russia was making the point. He was saying, you know, we can imagine in our mind 100 different scenarios for regime change in Russia, but the reality is it's always going to be the 101st option
Yeah.
that you haven't thought about.
Yeah.
And the other point he made was that you know, the Russian people have seen both in the collapse of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the Tsarist era that it all happened in 3 days. And it was done. Like it happened very rapidly.
Yeah.
And that is probably how it will go down again.
Yeah. Oh, that would be it's crazy to think about, but that is the history, right? Like that is what's happened.
Yeah. There's a great if I mean this we're getting like super nerdy now.
Do it, nerd it.
Uh, there's I've been reading off and on this book,
Oh
Tragedy in
God, you
Hope.
told me about this book. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of a somewhat famous book. I mean, it's written by a very prestigious professor, but also some of the passages in it are a little controversial and even got picked up by people who are conspiracy theorists. And I wanted to read the book for myself. And actually, it's very good. It's a history. It's kind of a history of the world,
Yeah.
really. But the chapters on the Soviet Union, on Nazi Germany. Um, I'm trying to. I mean, there's so much in here, but the chapters are filled with these like very interesting cultural insights. And I mean, I learned things about the Russians, and you know, it explains Putin, the tradition that Putin comes from, that he comes out of this tradition of, you know, the Russians seeing themselves as the most authentic expression of Slavic culture, which is the most authentic expression of humanity. And then it leads into all this like third Rome neo-fascism. It's very odd and very strange to our American minds. I'll put it that way.
Sure. Yeah. I remember you read me as part of it, a couple pages when you started reading it, and it was yeah, it was pretty fucking gnarly. Like
Yeah.
that's Putin's mindset. I'm sure it's not like everybody in Russia's
No, no,
mindset
it's not.
clearly, but I mean, a strong man in Russia, Russia's strong. Russia must be strong. We must show the world how strong Russia is. Like it's very caveman-esque, if you ask me.
This book was published in 1966.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super interesting. It goes through, you know, the dawn of civilization, basically, the Russian Empire, and then it goes back and talks about the economy, uh, changing economic patterns, policy of appeasement. I mean, and then I haven't even gotten to World War II yet. I think I just finished World War One.
Wow. I mean, thinking about like how in Russian history, at least recent Russian history, whether it was the Tsarists or the collapse of the Soviet Union or whatever, I mean, we did see a flicker of that possibility with like the
Hmm.
Wagner mutiny and stuff like that. Um, Granted, I don't know if Prigozhin would have been a better fucking leader than Putin, right?
The caterer, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
not.
But
Uh,
it showed a big chink in the armor. Like
mm,
he's not untouchable and stuff. I mean,
there's
he eventually got his, but you know what I mean.
there's a great documentary made by Adam Curtis called I believe it's called Trauma Zone if you look it up. And it's a documentary he made with like file footage that was in archives of Russia, and it follows, you know, through Russian life and culture and even governance, follows the collapse of the Soviet Union and how traumatic that was for the Russian people to experience that. And again, it's a very eye-opening documentary for me as an American. I've only come to understand that partly through that documentary and also speaking with some Russian people in the last, 5 years maybe, about how it wasn't just the collapse of the Soviet Union. They felt like they lost their country, they lost their future, they lost everything in kind of one fell swoop. And then the early 1990s was just like pure chaos in
Right.
Russia. And none of them, none of the people in Russia want to go back to that era. That's the fear.
The 90s.
Yeah.
Like yeah. Well, I mean, listen, how many generations under, communist rule and stuff, and that's gone over a short period of time. I could see how that could be traumatic for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't think we really get it as Americans. I was recently in Central Asia, in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, and especially in Bishkek. You can see that, I mean, clear as day, you can see the Soviet influence. From the hammer and sickles everywhere to statues of Marx and Engel. Um, I'm not, was there a Stalin statue? I can't remember, but I mean, you very much get the sense that, after the Soviet Union collapsed, some of these countries didn't quite get the memo. They were Soviet
Yeah,
socialist republics, SSRs. Um, and so it was kind of like mommy and daddy just abandoned their child at the playground.
yeah. Also feels like one of those things where it's like, this is hyperbolic, but like the Japanese soldier that was on the island that didn't know the war was over,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
and he's still fighting the war. His rifle's pristine, and he's fighting the war for 20 years.
Yeah. But so it's also interesting that these countries, the former USSR countries in Central Asia are kind of like trying to find their way forward, and they're kind of jacked up, but not that jacked up. They're not as bad as some people probably think.
Yeah.
You go to Kazakhstan, and I mean, it's a Almaty is a beautiful city.
Hmm.
You can go and hang out there, and you'll feel like you're in a coffee shop in Brooklyn. It's not that different.
Yeah.
Um, so these countries are kind of finding their way forward, which is interesting. But they are emerging out of that Soviet legacy. I mean, as is Ukraine. I mean, and we're seeing that pretty clearly.
Yeah. What's your take on the that Tucker Carlson where it's like the half of the weapons that are going to Ukraine are getting sold to Mexican cartels?
Tucker Carlson said that.
Oh, you didn't see this? Yeah, it was a
No,
few
no, I
days. It
didn't.
was a few days ago. It got buried, I think. That was basically I'm paraphrasing, but that was his whole premise was that like a lot of the weapons that are Ukraine's being sent are being sold to Mexican cartels.
Okay.
So Mexican cartels have like artillery and Bradley fighting vehicles and attackums,
Javelins. Yeah.
javelins. Yeah, yeah. They're just waiting to invade Texas.
I mean, this is like a very like interesting and honestly disconcerting period of history, this sort of like post-truth era, where
Yeah,
I feel like I have to like try to be beholden to facts, and
sure.
other people expect me to be beholden to facts, and I have to be calm and rational. But I know so many other people who feel no such obligation whatsoever,
At
even
all.
as they hold me to that standard. They can just say anything at all, no matter how gonzo it is.
Yeah,
Claims like Tucker Carlson's, saying things that are just blatantly not true.
yeah.
And people will look at you dead in the eyes and like, no, that's how it is.
And I have to give it to Tucker. The reason why he gets paid the big bucks is he's very convincing. He's saying it with such conviction. And I don't know if that makes him smart or like both. He's probably both. Like he's smart and also probably the most evil person around in terms of like a propagandist right wing kind of mouthpiece kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the question with a lot of them. Like, is it cynical, right? Do you really believe this, or are you just saying this because it's what the audience responds to?
He should win an Oscar if he's being cynical and he's doing this just for the audience, like red meat for the conspiracy theorists and
But
stuff.
I think also that when you do that kind of job, and I'm not just talking about Tucker Carlson, I think like any kind of like TV pundit,
Hmm.
especially when you do that job for a long enough time, I think you become like a caricature or a parody of yourself. because you have to play it up a little bit for the
Yeah.
camera. I mean, I guess we all do that a little bit. They really have to do it. They really have to bring it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I think over time you can become like, you start playing a character and then you become that character, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And he just walks around as Tucker Carlson, like the TV guy, or like the pundit. Yeah, I only brought it up because my friends in my group chat, and God bless my friends, I love my friends. Some of them are right wingers, and I love them, even though they are can be crazy sometimes. Um, they were sending me that, and I watched it, and I was like, "Yo, this guy is fucking good. He's good because he is so convincing. Like, just I said it before, like the conviction that he has saying it. It's like the CIA knows, the intelligence agencies know. Um, it was incredible. And now is the thing, like, and my friend who's not even like my friend who's more of a moderate, who's like down the middle, you know what I mean? Like, he just wants to be in the world, make money, take care of his family, you know what I mean? And he's not one side or the other. He's not MAGA, he's not left. Uh, he's like, "Yo, is this for real?" And I'm like, "No, bro, it's 100% not." Like, you're telling me that fucking Sinaloa cartel and Juarez have fucking artillery, 155 millimeter fucking artillery
Yeah,
shells that are pointing at something?
I see. Yeah, I can't get too mad at a guy like that, and I understand like the information environment is so crazy now that like you can understand why people are confused and
Yeah.
have these questions like, what the hell is going on? What is real? Um, and it's like it's a good question. I
Hmm.
mean, in an information environment that is this intense and there's this much misinformation and disinformation, yeah, like what is real? Um, and our construction of reality is, based on these images and ideas in our mind.
Yeah.
And a lot of them flowing into our mind are total bullshit. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
you're
it
right.
brings up some unsettling questions.
Yeah, that kind of freaks people. Yeah, that'll freak me out a little bit, right? Like, what is that's why we're living in the post-truth world. And it was funny because it was so perfectly cut up. It was like made for like a 1 minute clip for Instagram and TikTok or Twitter.
Or maybe he does believe it. And I mean, that's kind of the scary thing, right? Like, I
Yeah,
would actually be more comfortable if he's just like evil
me
and,
too.
you know,
Honestly, me too. Yeah.
yeah,
Be
like
like, all right,
Lex
this guy,
Luthor.
yeah, this
Yeah.
guy's just playing the role, and that's okay. I get it. You know what I mean? Like, there's money in it. Um, Going back to, we're all over the place, but going back to like the misinformation stuff and disinformation, I found it was a very interesting coincidence today. Two big podcasts, Joe Rogan and Sean Ryan, both had a guest named Mike Benz. And in those shows, he tears apart USAID and says how like it's a front for the CIA and it's something about for drug cartels or something. It was something to that effect. And they were both posted within like literally 12 hours of each other.
Yeah. And I
While
mean,
this, yeah, go ahead.
well, President Trump has appeared on both of those podcasts,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
the administration has a line to them. They can, make a phone call and,
I mean, but that's the to me, it's scary because like they talked about themselves, and a lot of other podcasts do talk about themselves as independent media, right? Like we're we're not kowtowing to any one party, one whatever, and more and more, it doesn't seem like that's the case. Like it seems like people are kind of taking their talking points and just their marching orders and just going out there and doing it. You know what I mean? Like and running spin for what's going on. Um,
the algorithm is determining what the truth is. And the truth is that people want the most bombastic,
yeah,
alarmist thing every single day. How does like hard news, like just regular fact-based news, even survive in an environment like that? And I mean, you're seeing it now. I think, we talked about how ineffectual Congress is. I also think that in the last couple weeks, we may have formally buried the American press once and for all. It's
what?
kind of been lingering and dying since about the advent of the internet that really messed them up, and they haven't really figured it. They were very late in adopting the digital era, and they still struggle for all the reasons everyone already knows about. But you can see that these like big legacy institutions, the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc., they still exist. They still publish, but they're also completely irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah. They've become the niche, right? Like they've become like not the mainstream. They've become like, oh yeah, I read the Times, like the New York Times.
And
It's like,
it's been like that for a while, man.
yeah,
Like even like 10, 15 years ago, if you took all the views that like Alex Jones was getting and stack that up compared to like the New York Times daily readership,
yeah,
like it's not even close.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Point like with Sean Ryan and Joe Rogan, like that podcast with that guy Mike Benz. Those two podcasts combined will probably get upwards close to 30 million views and listens over the next week or so, right? No news network, no newspaper or magazine has that kind of circulation and that kind of reach. Um, yeah, it's just it. Even like a guy like Rogan, like he used to have like everybody on, right? Like he would have all shapes and sizes and shades of the rainbow on. Um, More and more it's become less that, unfortunately, because I think he could do a really good job of like just getting people on there that could talk about their
Sure.
ideas or whatever that are contradictory to each other and stuff like that. It's just same thing with Lex Friedman. I know this is becoming like a bash podcast bashathon, but like Lex Friedman may be the dumbest human being I've ever seen in my life. You just listen to him and like you really think like, is this guy really an AI researcher? Like, is he really like super smart? Because like maybe it's the cadence of how he speaks, but he may be the most naive person I've ever listened to. And he gets great guests. And I don't know, I just wish these guys did a better job, not of like being more combative with something that they don't agree with, but I guess just being prepared, right? Like
Well,
for their
having, I think what's really important is to have a healthy sense of skepticism about things, regardless of the, political party
yeah,
or political policy. I mean, even policies I agree with, I mean, I still think that I should be a little bit skeptical and be like, well, really? Okay, let's take a closer look at that and
yeah,
see if that's for real or not. Or if something comes up in the news that I agree with, but maybe I should look a little bit deeper and see if that's actually true or not.
yeah.
Um, and I think maybe that's what you're speaking to. That sense of skepticism is lacking.
100, yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, I try to do the same thing, even if I'm liking what I'm hearing. Like, I'm looking for like another source or like, is this for real? Like, is it bullshit? Like, I'm always kind of skeptical about it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
especially when it's like very like emotionally manipulative. Hillary Clinton eats puppies or something like that. Like you need to start asking yourself some questions. Somebody who's
yeah,
targeting you, whether you know
yeah,
it or not.
yeah, no question. I mean, even on the left too, you see the left like kind of fracturing now, especially like since the loss in the election, where you see this hyper left, and not so much politicians, because you do have the like social democrat, democratic socialist folks like Bernie and AOC and them. Um, there, but the outside of politics, really, in like the commentator world, like you see a fracture where it's like, and I think it really started with Israel Palestine, October 7th. I think that was a big hit because people, you have the tankies who are like, American imperialism is horrible, like who like run all spin for like China and stuff. And then you have like the more moderate social democrats who are like, yeah, I think Israel probably should be exist as well as a Palestinian state. And that's like, you can't have that opinion. If you have
Yeah,
that, you're a monster. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I think like going back to what we said, the left is in a fucking, they're in disarray.
yeah, yeah. Whereas the right is pretty much unified.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much
They're good soldiers.
consolidated,
Yeah.
unified. They got big tech on their side, which they always told us was really bad and evil, but now they're on
Right.
their side. I guess they're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they got, three branches of government. They got these corporations. I mean, Google is on their side. They got Facebook, they got Twitter. I mean, they did pretty well for
Amazon.
themselves,
Yeah. They
man.
have everything. Yeah. I mean, and what the funny thing is, they have both houses of Congress. They have the judicial, the Supreme Court anyway. And if you have issues with the budget, pass a budget bill with cutting stuff, right? Like go through line item by line item and actually take cuts to it rather than circumventing what's going on with Elon Musk. I think that's the biggest beef people have with that. That's what I
Yeah,
have with that, right?
but
Like,
I mean, this is the plan, right? I mean, they're trying to basically roll back the New Deal. The whole like New Deal America. They're trying to go back in time to, like the 1890s or so and bring back the era of robber barons where you have like these railroad magnates
right.
who like just own America. They're
Yeah.
trying to bring back that era. And that sort of like techno fascism
Yeah.
is, I mean, that's good for them. It's good politics for them. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
doubt that. But
Yeah.
for the country, for the vast, the 99% of the people who live here, it's not going to be good for you.
No. No. Also, I'd love to see where they could cut, right? Like, because I'm down. I'm sure there's a
Yeah,
ton
no,
of
I'm fine with that
departments.
too. I consider myself to be like a small government guy. Like
Right.
in another era, another time, I would have been like a Ronald Reagan Republican.
Right.
It's just because of the times that we're in that I'm really
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have no issue with like reviewing the agencies and institutions of government, making sure that they're spending their money, the taxpayers' money, correctly. I think that's completely legit.
Yeah. And it's completely fair, right? Like, because,
Yeah,
our taxes get taken out
yeah,
and we want to know where the money goes, like myself included, right? And I'm sure you could dig into most departments and find waste. And like, I just wish politicians, and this is like wishful thinking, but I wish politicians went into it with a little bit more good faith. You know what I mean? Like going in there trying to make changes that are actually beneficial for people. I mean, it's totally wishful thinking. I'm a child.
yeah. Um,
It's okay. You can admit it.
there's Yeah, I mean the problem is like, when you're dealing with a populist, you're basically just telling the public whatever they find emotionally satisfying on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
which makes that quite difficult, I think. Um, what you need is another bad word is elitism. So we used to have elites that felt that they knew what was best for us, and sometimes they were wrong. But there used to be political leaders who would do that, and they would force, not force, but through the systems of governance, institute policy changes. And today we have politicians that are more interested on getting their Fox News hit in.
Right.
That is the main effort. The media spectacle is the main effort. Your Social Security, the deficit, Ukraine, none of that shit is the main effort. None of that matters.
Hmm.
It's the spectacle that's important.
Yikes. Yeah. Getting the highlight, getting that thing, that 10-word answer that like really goes viral.
Yep.
We're fucked. I get it. It's fine. I don't know how this got to this. We're supposed to talk about Ukraine. I mean, I guess we did. So, but it's fine. People are freaking out in the comments, and that's fine. Freak out.
Yeah. I mean, if you got to freak out, and we'll talk later on. It's fine.
Yeah. Um. What else? Check out We Defy. Link is in the description. Jack's new
Yep.
book about
Thank
Special
you.
Forces history. Project Green Light, Blue Light.
Thank you guys for everyone who read the book. Appreciate it.
The SIF teams, how they started. Um, Forward by Chris Miller, former acting
Yep.
Secretary of Defense and former Team House guest. New merch store, guys. Check it out. The link is in the description. Get patches, stickers. Right here. Patches, stickers, t-shirts, mugs, everything is down there in the description. Um, all the other guys' links are also in the description for Mick, Jason, and Andy. Um, best way to support the show is patreon.com/the team house. You get two podcasts for the price of one. $5 member, you get ad-free audio and video. You can ask questions without doing super chats on YouTube. And you get early access. You can watch the shows live now. The Team House shows live. Um, $10 member, you get a patch sent to you in the mail. When you become a $10 member, you just DM us on Patreon with your address, and I will get it to you. And the $100 member, we'll talk about that when you become a $100 member, but what you get there, that we'll get demonetized if we say what we do for the $100 members.
Really?
No, you can get a
Oh,
Zoom call if you want a Zoom call with the guys. That's the
I was like,
$100 member,
I was
plus
like,
all
you
the other
demonetized for
perks.
that now?
Nah. No, I was gonna say something sexual. Jack shows his feet off. And that's it.
You gotta find me on OnlyFans for that.
Jack, anything else you want to plug? High side, the high side, of course.
Yeah, we're writing national security journalism that we publish on the high side, and otherwise, I'm actually hard at work on a new book project that I can't really talk about yet. But it's a novel that I've been hired to write, so I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Jack's doing the damn thing. Author and journalist. That's great. Thehighside.com. I'm going to throw that link in the description as well. You and Sean Naylor, of course. And we're looking forward to that book. That's all I got.
All
Thanks,
right,
Shaq.
yeah, see you guys next time.